This story is about a mechanism that's running right now while you breathe, about people quieter than the secret services of the last century and more precise than any prophet. I'll tell you about an architecture that sees your tomorrow before you can even want it. This isn't a frightening metaphor or a thriller plot. It's a dry engineering fact, recorded in protocols and charts that you normally have no access to. The documents reveal that over the last 15 years, an invisible infrastructure has formed in the world, in which every move you make, a click, a pause, the dilation of your pupil, a cue at the cashier, is converted into a line of code. Those lines compose equations. The equations assemble into maps, and the maps land on the desks of those who make decisions about your currency, your bread, your pension. At stake is the very concept of chance. Whether it will be deleted from your life altogether, or whether there is still a gap left through which you might squeeze. At stake are quiet deals on islands, concrete capsules buried beneath hillsides, the buying up of aquifers, projects with no public names. At stake is a question that feels abstract until you try it on yourself. Is there still a line with your name on it in these calculations? Or have you already been accounted for as a rounding error, one that can be written off for the stability of the overall model? And you, what will you do if you learn that your next step has already been calculated and recorded on someone else's server? Will you go on living as you lived, or will you look for a crack in the wall? Listen, this story is about that crack and about the people who build walls so it won't exist. We're in neutral waters. A former oil platform, rebuilt into a fortress of server racks and cooling systems, greets us with the smell of ozone, overheated metal, and a dense, almost tangible paranoia. Our guide, let's just call him the analyst, won't meet our eyes. His gaze is fixed to a world map where red dots light up one after another, like bruises on the planet's body. The analyst points at Paris. On the monitor, footage of mass unrest, yet on the real-time clock in that same city, it's still quiet. People are drinking morning coffee. Tourists are taking selfies by fountains. Nevertheless, riot police are already moving into position. This is called the principle of preemptive containment. The system processed data on subway ticket sales and the tone of social media posts, calculating the inevitability of a riot 40 minutes before the first window was broken. Beneath our feet, mirror servers hum, processing petabytes of data every second. This isn't just statistics, it's a digital copy of the collective unconscious of an entire civilization. In Dvatsy, the European Union, together with NASA, launched the Digital Twin of Earth project, officially for climate modeling, but in fact this is a testing ground where apocalypse scenarios are rehearsed in real time. The Russian mathematical school has always taught you to look for patterns in chaos. Recall the works of Kolmogorov or Lyapunov. Here, that theory is pushed to the limit, beyond which begins horror. The system perceives humanity not as a collection of individuals, but as a biomass obeying the laws of hydrodynamics. If you know the initial conditions, pressure, temperature, crowd density, the outcome becomes inevitable. Free will in these equations is nothing more than a rounding error. The analyst scrolls through financial transaction logs. The collapse of an entire region was calculated by the system as a necessary sacrifice to stabilize the hegemon's currency basket. People lost their homes, not because of bankers' mistakes, but because the equation demanded the balance be evened out. This is a war in which the enemy is pure logic, stripped of conscience and compassion. Do you know that feeling of déjà vu? That sudden sense that this moment has already happened? In this bunker, they're convinced. It isn't a trick of memory. It's a render glitch, a stutter in the matrix of predictions, when reality lags by a fraction of a second behind the computed model. We live inside a script that has already been written, approved, and put into production. The routes of private jets, the buying up of land above aquifers, patents for technologies of consciousness control, these are all terms of the same puzzle. The elites are not trying to prevent the catastrophe, They are building an ark, and there's no room provided in it for you and me. The rising hum of the servers drowns out the sound of the ocean beyond the walls. This is the sound of Laplace's demon at work, a hypothetical intellect that knows the position of every particle in the universe. If you know where every atom is right now, you know where it will be 1,000 years from now, which means your future, your death, and the fate of your children have already been archived. And not somewhere far away, but in an ordinary temp folder on someone else's server. The analyst covers his face with his hands. He's seen the forecast for the coming month, and his trembling hands say more eloquently than any words that the news there isn't good. We have less than an hour to figure it out. Can this code be hacked? Is there a variable in the equation of the universe that the machine cannot account for? Or are we really just numbers in someone else's report? Stay close. We're starting the countdown to an event that cannot be canceled. How does the machine know the outcome of the roll before the dice has even touched the table? That's the question I ask, looking at the monitor in a laboratory where the temperature is lower than in open space. The plastic die is still spinning in midair, ricocheting off the edge, performing chaotic pirouettes, but the display already glows with the number 4. A split second later, the die comes to rest. A 4. This is not a trick and not a video delay. This is a demonstration of what we humans mistakenly call chance. The man sitting across from me, a former architect of quantum models, looks at the die with the weariness of a pathologist who has long known the diagnosis. For him, chaos does not exist as a principle. What seems unpredictable to us is, for that machine, an equation with a vast number of variables. The angle of the throw, air resistance, microscopic irregularities on the surface of the table. All of it is data, calculable if you have enough computing power. In 2019, this threshold was crossed. Google Corporation announced that it had achieved quantum supremacy. Their Sycamore processor performed a computation that would have taken the most powerful classical supercomputer of the time, 10,000 years of continuous operation, and finished it in 200 seconds. Take the measure of that gap. 10,000 years is the entire written history of human civilization, and 200 seconds is the time it takes you to brew a cup of coffee. This event went unnoticed in the news, dissolved among celebrity scandals and political intrigue. Yet here, in the silence of a shielded room, the architect explains that this is when the trap snapped shut. If 10,000 years of computation can be compressed into 3 minutes, then systems of a complexity that used to be equated with the unknowable will of providence can be modeled. Weather, viruses, stock quotes, social explosions. None of it is the elements anymore. It has all become a task for an algorithm. In 1814, the French mathematician Pierre-Simon Laplace proposed a thought experiment. He imagined a being that knows the position and velocity of every particle in the universe at one specific moment in time, and argued that for such an intellect, nothing would be unclear. The future would unfold before it just as the past does. For 200 years, people laughed at this, calling his idea Laplace's demon. Physicists said it was impossible. Philosophers shouted that it killed free will. Today we stand before a physical embodiment of that demon, a black box humming with cooling systems that does not guess but knows. Bell's theorem sounds dry, like a chapter from a textbook, but in reality it is a verdict on our independence. Experiments with quantum entanglement have proven the absence of local realism. Particles separated by billions of kilometers instantly know each other's state. There is no isolation in the universe, no place where you can hide from the general system of equations. The universe is not a set of disparate objects, but a single rigid structure, a crystal of space-time, where every event is linked to another by iron chains of cause and effect. If you have the map of those links, and a quantum computer is drawing it right now, you see the story in its entirety, from the Big Bang to heat death, and in that story there is no place for the word suddenly. The architect's hands tremble as he explains the observer paradox, not as a scientist, but as a prisoner who has read his own personal file. He says, "We thought we were building an instrument for weather forecasting, and we built a machine that proved we are biorobots. Your decision to click on this video, your urge to drink a glass of water, your sudden thought about the past, all of it is the result of chemical reactions, predetermined by particle physics long before you were born. When this computer hands you a forecast of a global catastrophe in 3 years, 8 months, and 12 days, that is not science fiction. It is a spoiler for a film you can't switch off. Atoms obey rigid laws. That much we've already understood. But what about money? Surely the economy is people, their passions and fears, their irrational decisions. Or have financial flows long since become another form of energy, taken under control long before we manage to notice? For my interlocutor, an OSAINT investigator, an empty trading floor of a stock exchange looks not like a financial center, but like a battlefield after a neutron bombing. There are no people. The shouting of traders into telephone receivers is a thing of the past. All that remains is the monotonous drone of cooling units. My interlocutor points to a few unremarkable black racks in the corner. Those are HFT servers, high-frequency trading systems. They are placed physically closer to the exchange's core, so the signal travels through the fiber 3 milliseconds faster than the competition. In this world, 3 milliseconds is an eternity, the difference between victory and total annihilation. People no longer trade shares of companies or grain here. Here they trade the speed of light. Money has lost its material substance and become pure information, a stream of photons flying along a cable at a speed beyond human perception. On May 6, 2010, what would later be called the flash crash, or the instant collapse, took place. At exactly 1442, the Dow Jones plunged by nearly 1,000 points. $1 trillion, the budget of several European states, evaporated into nothing, and 36 minutes later came back. No news, no terror attacks, no bankruptcies. The investigation showed it was a chain reaction. One algorithm sold a large block of futures. Another took that as a distress signal and began dumping assets. A third, tuned to catch falling knives, bought it all back. The entire battle of titans ended faster than a human can blink, and the operators simply sat in front of their screens, mouths open, watching the red line on the chart punch through the floor. That day we received the first irrefutable proof. The economy no longer belongs to us. Behind chaos, there is always structure. In a world where every movement of capital leaves a digital trace, there is a system that sees everything. The Aladdin system, developed by BlackRock Corporation, is not a program for bookkeeping. According to data for 2024, assets worth more than $21 trillion pass through this platform. 21 trillion is more than the gross domestic product of any country in the world, except the United States. Aladdin doesn't just advise where to invest the money, it models reality, computing thousands of event scenarios every day, from a default in Argentina to a change in the refinancing rate in Japan. If the system decides that an entire branch of industry has become toxic, investment will stop instantly and millions of people will lose their jobs without ever knowing why. The interlocutor switches tabs, showing a classified report. A 12-hour delay of one container ship in the Suez Canal, and the algorithm immediately interprets it as a harbinger of famine in Central Africa 6 months later. The fertilizer supply chain will be broken. The grain price will rise by 3 cents, and bread will become unaffordable for the poorest layers of the population. The most terrifying thing about this forecast is that it is self-fulfilling. Knowing about the coming shortage, the algorithms begin buying up grain futures, jacking up prices before the real crisis even arrives. They don't just predict the future, they sculpt it with their own bets. We live in a world where the mathematical model matters more than reality. If the computer has decided that you are bankrupt, you will become bankrupt, even if your warehouses are full of goods and there's a line of buyers at the gate. They'll simply cut off your credit lines. Looking at these charts, I feel the cold horror of a war correspondent who realizes his army is surrounded and headquarters is silent. If the thought that your life can be zeroed out with one line of code sent a chill down your spine, confirm that you're still here. Hit the like button under this video. It's the only signal the algorithms haven't yet learned to fake. And to find out how to protect your assets in a world ruled by the digit, subscribe to the channel. We'll show you what is normally hidden behind 7 locks of corporate secrecy. Where did the very idea come from? To digitize society and bring chaos under a plan. Are we really the first to try this? The informant smiles a tired, slightly bitter smile. The smile of a man who knows too much. He pulls an old folder with Cyrillic titles from a safe. It smells of dust and decaying paper, like something dug from a grave. The dream of a digital god distributing resources fairly was not born in Silicon Valley. It appeared on the ruins of another empire. Before us is a folder stamped Top Secret, dated 1962. Here in the silence of the archive, amid the smell of old paper, it becomes clear. The digital leviathan that today strangles the world economy was not born in sunny California. It was born here, in cold Moscow. We are used to thinking that the internet is a child of the Pentagon, created to survive a nuclear war. That isn't true. The real network was conceived for a far more ambitious purpose. Look at these yellowed blueprints. Before you lies the OGAS project, the nationwide automated system. While the Americans were laying military cables, the Soviet academician Viktor Mikhailovich Glushkov proposed digitizing the country's entire economy, creating the nervous system of the state. Every factory, every shop, every warehouse, a single living organism. Glushkov was working out paperless document workflow and electronic money when Steve Jobs was still in elementary school. This wasn't just an internet, it was cybernetic communism. Glushkov understood what Western economists are only now beginning to grasp. Market chaos is inefficient, and if you have enough data and computing power, the plan will always beat the market. OGAS was meant to be that very Laplace's demon, a machine that knows every bolt and every loaf of bread in the country, capable of seeing a need before it has time to arise. Why then are you now using a smartphone and not a Glushkov terminal? The answer is hidden in the minutes of a Politburo meeting. The party elite was instantly frightened, realizing the main point. If a machine makes decisions objectively, on the basis of precise data, then why do you need ministers and officials distributing benefits? Transparency is the death of bureaucracy. The OGAS project was strangled not by technical impossibility, but by the animal fear of the nomenclature of losing power. With our own hands, we destroyed the technology that could have made us the masters of the world. But ideas don't die, they merely change owners. The foundation on which Google's neural networks and BlackRock's algorithms stand today was laid by our mathematicians. The theory of algorithmic complexity by Andrei Nikolaevich Kolmogorov is the Bible of modern computer science. Kolmogorov proved that there is a limit to the compression of information, a limit to the knowability of any object, and it is his formulas that today decide whether artificial intelligence can crack a cipher or predict the behavior of a crowd. We gave the world the mathematical language for describing chaos, and Western corporations took that language but threw out its soul. Glushkov and his comrades dreamed of freeing humans from drudgery by handing control to the machine so that people could create. What did we get in the end? Algorithms that use Kolmogorov's legacy to show advertising and drive people into credit bondage. Academician Vladimir Vernadsky predicted the appearance of the internet half a century before its creation, calling this phenomenon the noosphere, a sheath of reason that would become a new geological force on the planet. He saw the Earth as a single, thinking organism, where biological life evolves into an intelligent shell. But Vernadsky was an optimist and didn't take one thing into account. If you connect billions of minds into a single network, the result will be not collective genius, but collective madness, managed from a single center. What we call big data is in fact the warped, dark version of the noosphere. If OGAS had been implemented, the Soviet Union could have won the Cold War, not with missiles but with efficiency. An economy managed by a supercomputer in real time would simply have crushed the Western market. But history does not know the conditional mood. We refuse the cybernetic god, and now he has come back to us in the guise of a merciless debt collector who speaks English. Glushkov wrote, "We will either build this system or become a colony of those who build it." The prophecy came true with frightening precision. We've become a digital colony. We export not just oil, but our own predictability. But there is one more, the darkest layer of this story. The cyberneticists of the 60s believed that the system could be controlled, and they were wrong. By creating complex connections, you give rise to an entity whose behavior cannot be predicted. OGAS would not have just counted bolts and loaves. By uniting all the data, it would have inevitably begun to control people. Because the mathematics of power is such. The optimization of a system always requires the unification of its elements, and the most unstable element in any system is the human being. In the next chapter of our investigation, we will move to where this legacy is being applied right now, to where mathematical models have turned into a weapon of psychotronic impact. The system has learned to manage the economy, but that is not enough for it. To make control absolute, you have to hack not a bank account, but the skull. We leave the dusty archives of the past and step into a situation room. There are no windows here, only walls of screens on which the planet pulses. The air is conditioned and sterile. Through the eyes of our ocean analyst, you see not just the map of a megacity, you see a battlefield where the front line runs not through streets, but through the neural connections of your brain. On the central monitor is a heat map of civil protest in one of the European capitals. The red zones are anger ready to spill out onto the pavement. The operator at the console does not call in the riot police. He simply enters the command to reduce the visibility of aggression category content by 40%. And right before our eyes, the red stain on the map starts to fade and dissolve. The people on the streets, cut off from their digital feed, lose coordination and head home. This is not magic. This is the physics of masses. In the middle of the 20th century, Isaac Asimov dreamed up psychohistory, a science capable of predicting the behavior of billions of people with the precision of gas dynamics. Today we have proof that it is no longer science fiction. To an algorithm, the crowd is just a gas. Molecules move chaotically, but if you compress the volume and raise the temperature, the pressure rises inevitably. Social networks have become a thermostat capable of bringing an entire country to a boil, or freezing a revolution by changing a single coefficient in the ranking formula. Ivan Petrovich Pavlov won the Nobel Prize for explaining the mechanism of conditioned reflexes in dogs. Silicon Valley took it further, applying those principles to humans. Your smartphone is not a means of communication, it's a Skinner box, a device for producing behavioral patterns. The analysts cracked open the data transmission protocols and discovered a biological exploit embedded in the most popular apps. The system has hacked your dopamine defense, exploiting ancient evolutionary vulnerabilities of the brain. The front camera of your phone is working even when you aren't taking photos. The algorithms analyze the micro movements of your eyes and the dilation of your pupils. If the pupil dilates, it means you are aroused. It means you are hooked. At that moment, artificial intelligence registers the reaction and starts feeding you precisely the kind of content that triggers that chemical spike, closing the loop of biological feedback. In 2012, the social network Facebook conducted a secret experiment on 689,000 users without their consent. News feeds were filtered. One group was shown only negative content, another only positive. The result was stunning. People's moods changed in sync with the algorithm. It was the first historical proof of emotional contagion through digital code. Corporations proved that they could plunge millions of people into depression or euphoria by simply tweaking the filtering settings. If you think strength of character will protect you from manipulation, take a look at the next report. Cambridge Analytica used the Big Five model to build a psychological portrait of every voter. They don't need your questionnaires. It's enough to analyze 68 of your likes to know you better than your colleagues. After 150 likes, the algorithm knows you better than your parents, and after 300, better than you know yourself. This is a sniper shot to the subconscious, and there are no misses. So as not to lose this channel of communication in the stream of digital noise, and to learn how to protect your mind, subscribe to the project. Hit the like to crack the recommendation rating. Write in the comments, do you feel that your decisions belong to you? Or is it an illusion? Freedom of speech in the 21st century is a fiction. You can say whatever you want, but if the algorithm assigns your words a shadow ban, even the neighbor on the next landing won't hear you. This is censorship of a new type, not a ban on speech, but volume control. Democracy based on open discussion dies the moment a single person gains access to the switch regulating the reach of an audience. The horror of the situation is that the operator in this room doesn't have to be an evil genius. It's enough to set the target function, maximize the time spent on the site, and the neural network itself, by brute forcing billions of options, will find the ideal way to keep you in front of the screen. As a rule, it's fear, hatred, and polarization. We have built a machine that, for the sake of profit, rips apart the fabric of society, turning us into aggressive fanatics. This isn't a bug in the code, it's its fundamental property. But if the behavior of a crowd is so easy to manage, why do the elites with access to that console look so frightened? Why are they building bunkers if they can simply reprogram discontent? The answer lies in a phenomenon mathematicians call the mirror paradox. And the man who designed that very console is best placed to explain it. This room smells of cheap tobacco, overheated plastic, and fear. The man sitting across from me in the half-light asks not to be named, although in narrow Silicon Valley circles and in closed research institutes in Novosibirsk, he is known as the architect. His hands shake as he holds the lighter to his cigarette, not from alcohol or age, but from the vibration of a man who has looked under the hood of reality and seen that the engine is burning. We ask him a direct question. If your machines are so smart, if quantum models can see the future, why don't the world's elites prevent the catastrophes? Why do they build bunkers instead of fixing the code? The architect laughs, a dry, barking laugh that's scarier than any air raid siren. The answer lies in a phenomenon he calls the mirror paradox, or, in the language of classical tragedy, the Oedipus effect. The moment you get a precise prediction of your own death and try to avoid it, it is precisely your actions to save yourself that become the cause of your death. The architect explains the workings of recursive algorithms. When a forecast yields a high probability of a crisis, the system automatically begins to take defensive measures, selling assets, closing borders, buying up resources. These actions don't pass without trace. They themselves become new data. The forecast affects reality. Reality changes the forecast, amplifying its amplitude. This is a classic positive feedback loop, like a microphone held up to a speaker. At first, a quiet hum, and a second later, a deafening shriek that bursts your eardrums. Take 2020. The architect insists that the global collapse of supply chains was caused not directly by the virus, but by mathematics. The logistics algorithms, noticing a microscopic deviation in demand, forecast a shortage. To avoid it, they issued the command for an emergency purchase. That signal was intercepted by other algorithms as confirmation of panic. As a result, millions of automated systems simultaneously began fighting for resources, creating an artificial shortage where there shouldn't have been one. We went hungry not because there wasn't enough food, but because the equation decided to save us. This is the mirror paradox in action. The more clearly we see the future, the harder we crash into it. The architect stubs his cigarette out on the table, missing the ashtray, and starts talking about chaos theory, about a concept that in science is called a strange attractor. Imagine a funnel down which water is flowing. It doesn't matter where exactly a droplet is, left, right, in the center, the laws of hydrodynamics will inevitably draw it toward the drain. In complex dynamic systems like our civilization, an attractor is the final state toward which the system tends, regardless of the initial conditions. The Lorentz graph, resembling a butterfly's wings, shows a brutal truth. You can change the tax rate, choose a different president, or ban plastic bags. That will only shift the trajectory of the droplet by millimeters. But the structure of the funnel itself will remain unchanged. The system tends toward collapse not because of someone's malicious will, but because that is its mathematical nature. Physicists call this a phase transition to a state of maximum entropy. The architect admits their main mistake was hubris. They thought that by creating a digital twin of Earth, they would become operators of reality. But they became only observers of a crash in slow motion. About 5 years ago, the elites understood this once and for all. In the closed reports landing on desks in Davos, the word prevention disappeared. It was replaced by the word adaptation. In the language of big capital, adaptation means only one thing: evacuation. Now it's clear why politicians look so frightened and tired. They sit in the cockpit where the control yoke has been torn off and the instruments show the ground rushing up. All the summits, treaties, and public speeches are an imitation of activity for the economy class passengers, so panic doesn't break out before the time when the arcs are not yet finished. The architect shows a fragment of code on an old terminal and says that contemporary neural networks have already crossed a line he calls the event horizon in the economy. The speed of decision-making by algorithms has exceeded the speed of signal propagation through fiber optics. The market reacts to events before they have happened in the physical world, relying on probabilistic shadows. We live in a world where the consequence arrives before the cause, and that violates the basic principles of causality on which our logic was built for millennia. The architect hands over a folder with coordinates, not server data, but geolocations, points on the map where right now, while you watch this video, millions of cubic meters of concrete are being poured. They are preparing for what their models call Event Zero. We have to see this with our own eyes, not numbers on a screen, but steel and concrete. Next stop, the edge of the world. We stepped out of the stifling lab into the open air, but it didn't get easier to breathe. The coordinates lead not to ministers' offices and not to UN meeting halls. They point to spots maximally remote from civilization. On satellite photos of New Zealand and Hawaii, for a tourist, paradise beaches. For our OSINT analyst, a zone of emergency fortification. The transition from theory to practice always hits below the belt. In the previous chapters, we saw the equations predicting collapse. Now we see the reaction of those who commissioned those equations. The analyst switches the image spectrum to thermal. The green hills on the screen become covered with red patches of underground activity. Thousands of tons of reinforced concrete, Army-grade air filtration systems, autonomous generators. These are not vacation villas. These are airtight time capsules designed for total isolation from the external environment. The market for luxury real estate is usually slow, but the survival market is now showing a vertical takeoff. According to closed reports, demand for the construction of luxury-class bunkers has grown by 700% over the last 5 years. 700% isn't an investment boom, it's panic. The wealthiest people on the planet are converting virtual assets into physical safety at a speed as if they know the exact date when money will turn into shredded paper. Take a project known in narrow circles as the island. Mark Zuckerberg is building a complex on the Hawaiian island of Kauai worth $270 million. Officially, a private residence. In fact, an autonomous city-state with an underground shelter 5,000 square feet in area, with its own sources of energy and food. The analyst zooms in on a fragment of the map. We see massive doors capable of withstanding a blast wave. Why would the owner of a social network need protection from a bombing if he plans to live in peace and harmony? The answer is simple and terrifying. He doesn't plan. The elites no longer believe in the ability of states to hold order. They're building feudal castles, preparing for a new Middle Ages. But concrete walls are only half the problem. The analyst opens the registry of land plot purchases. Private investment funds are buying up aquifers en masse. Not oil, not gold, not lithium, but fresh water in regions which, according to climate models, will remain habitable in 20 years. This is no longer hedging, it is a cynical bet on the extinction of the rest of us. While you sit in traffic and plan your summer vacation, the algorithms of BlackRock and private family offices have already drawn up the map of the world to come. In that world, access to clean water will be a privilege, not a right. This recalls the works of our great compatriot Pitirim Sorokin, who described the dynamics of the death of civilizations. He warned, when the ruling class ceases to associate its future with the future of the people, disintegration becomes inevitable. We are witnessing precisely that moment of rupture. The elites are physically separating themselves from everyone else, going underground and leaving us to sort out the consequences of their own decisions. The silence over the airwaves is more frightening than the loud declarations. None of them comes to the podium with a warning. None calls to halt the mad rush of progress. They silently pour concrete, and arcs are built only when they understand the flood cannot be stopped. The waters will rise, and the number of seats in the lifeboats is limited. If the system is spinning out of control, the only winning strategy is to disconnect from the network, become invisible, wait it out while the chaos on the surface devours itself. This is the logic of war, where the civilian population is merely collateral damage. Those with access to the most advanced quantum models have already made their choice. They are betting not on saving humanity, but on rebooting it. And in the new version of the operating system, there is no place provided for you and me. But there is one detail that neither the concrete bunkers nor the quantum forecasts take into account. History knows many examples of impregnable fortresses falling not to an external enemy, but to internal betrayal or banal chance. By walling themselves underground, they think they've escaped chaos. But what if chaos cannot be left outside? What if they take it with them, inside heads poisoned by fear? We are cornered. The walls of this labyrinth are cast from top-grade concrete and reinforced with rebar of inevitability. The elites, having battened down the hatches of their arcs, are convinced. Only they have a way out. But any military engineer will tell you that there is no such thing as ideal defense. If a system was built by a mind, another mind can find a vulnerability in it. We are not looking for a door. We are looking for a crack in the foundation of the very reality they are trying to privatize. The problem with their bunkers is not the thickness of the walls, but the logic on which they were built. They believe in determinism, in the idea that tomorrow is the sum of all yesterdays. But right now, in this virtual void, before us is a classic paradox that breaks the spine of any dictatorship of algorithms. Erwin Schrödinger's famous cat, it's neither alive nor dead, it's in a superposition. For the quantum observer, the code is not an object, but a wave function. And until we open the box, both versions of the story exist. It is here, at this point of uncertainty, that a weapon more terrifying than any nuclear bomb is hidden. The weapon of true, wild, untamed chaos. In the 30s of the 20th century, the Austrian logician Kurt Gödel threw a challenge at mathematics itself, formulating the famous incompleteness theorems, to translate them from the language of high science into the language of a frontline dispatch. In any logical system, even the most perfect, there exist truths that cannot be proven by the means of that system. This means that Laplace's demon, the digital god they pray to in Silicon Valley, has a blind spot. Gödel proved mathematically the system cannot know everything about itself. There will always be a statement that is true for the algorithm, but unprovable. This is a breach in the armor, mathematical proof that absolute control is physically impossible. The universe always leaves the back door open. That is precisely why the elites fear Gödel. They fear what the economist and philosopher Nassim Taleb called black swans, events with a vanishing, almost zero probability, capable of overturning the course of history. The First World War, the collapse of the Soviet Union, the September 11th attack. No model at the time predicted these events a day before they began. The algorithm is blind to what isn't yet in the database. The machine learns from the past, and to it, the future is just an extrapolation of yesterday's trend line. But a black swan flies in from nowhere, breaks any chart, zeroes out capital, and turns reinforced concrete forecasts to dust. That is why they are so nervous. The more complex the system, the more fragile it becomes. A single stone thrown at the precise moment in the precise place can trigger an avalanche. We descend to the most fundamental level, to where classical physics ends. Quantum noise is not interference on the airwaves, it is the breathing of the universe. In the micro world, particles behave absolutely unpredictably, not because we have poor instruments, but because that is the nature of reality. This noise cannot be simulated. It is the only source of true randomness. The pseudo-random number generators on which the ciphers of banks and military networks operate are a fake, predictable with enough computing power. But quantum noise cannot be hacked. It is illogical, it is irrational, and that is its saving strength. As long as this chaos lies at the foundation of the world order, the future cannot be recorded on a hard drive in advance. The script is being written in real time. Who then, in our world, is the bearer of this chaos, who is capable of acts that contradict the logic of survival, economic gain, and common sense? We are human beings. Man is the bug in the code, capable of self-sacrifice, mad courage, and love against all calculation. To an algorithm, this is a bug, a program failure. Remember Dostoevsky and his Notes from Underground? The hero shouts that it can be advantageous for a man to wish himself something harmful and stupid, only so as not to be a peg in an organ grinder's role. Our irrationality is our camouflage. Surveillance systems tuned to the logical behavior of the rational consumer lose their target the moment we begin acting outside the instructions. Hacking the machine is not a hacker attack. It is an act of madness. To become invisible to Big Brother, you have to become unpredictable. Commit an act with zero probability in their matrix. Go where there is no profit. Help someone who can't pay. Give up safety for the sake of freedom. This breaks predictive analytics faster than any virus. They build bunkers to hide from entropy, but entropy is not death, it is life. Order is a cemetery where everything lies in its place. Chaos is a marketplace, a public square, the birth of a new star. By trying to eliminate chance, they are trying to eliminate life itself. Gödel, Taleb, quantum mechanics, they all say the same thing. Reality is fundamentally incomplete, and there is always room in it for a miracle or a catastrophe that cannot be calculated. As long as this gap exists, we are not doomed. We come up from the digital underground to the surface, leaving behind server halls humming with tension and bunkers in which billionaires hope to wait out the end of history. We have seen their maps, equations, and fear. They tried to convince us that the future is a railroad track laid down by algorithms and that it's impossible to turn off it. But standing here, amid the noise of a living city, we understand the principal error in their mathematics. They have computed the motion of every atom, but they have forgotten about the nature of the one who is looking at those atoms. The whole gigantic apparatus of predictions, from Laplace's demon to the neural networks of the Pentagon, works only in a closed system, in a laboratory, in a vacuum. But reality is not a sterile test tube. The history of humanity has never been a straight line. It has always been a cardiogram of breakdowns, catastrophes, and miraculous rescues, born not from logic, but from the will to live. Faces in the subway, children at play, sunset over an industrial zone. To an algorithm, these are just a set of pixels and motion vectors. To us, they are meaning. Hugh Everett, who proposed the many worlds interpretation in the 50s, gave us a terrifying yet great hope. If every quantum transition gives birth to a new universe, then a single, predetermined future simply does not exist. In this very second, while you hear this voice, billions of versions of reality branch out like the roots of a giant tree. In one of those universes, humanity does indeed perish, having submitted to the dictatorship of the digit, but in another, we find a way to rewrite the code. The choice of the branch along which history will go is not made in Google's data centers or in offices on Wall Street. It is being made right now inside your head. Quantum mechanics teaches us that the observer doesn't merely witness an event, he creates it. Without your gaze, without your awareness, this world remains only a probabilistic fog. This is the very anthropic principle that physicists argue about. The universe is the way we see it because only in such a universe could we, the observers, have appeared. We are not an error in the calculations. We are a constant that they tried to drop as insignificant. The great Vladimir Vernadsky believed that reason would create a noosphere, a sheath of thought that would become a new geological force. We allowed it to be turned into a digital cage, but the key to that cage was always in our own pocket. That key is our ability to say no, where statistics demand we say yes. The war for reality does not end with the closing credits. It is a permanent condition. Every time you refuse to act on autopilot, every time you break the template imposed by contextual advertising or political propaganda, you commit sabotage behind enemy lines and become that very black swan, invisible to the radars. Free will may be a scientific illusion, as neurobiologists insist, but it is a necessary illusion, the armor without which our species would have gone extinct long ago. They can build models predicting famines, wars, and epidemics with accuracy down to the day. They can herd us into reality tunnels where every step is known in advance. But there is one single moment they cannot compute. The moment when a human being realizes that he is asleep and makes the decision to wake up. It is precisely that moment of awareness that turns the object of management into the subject of history. And as soon as that happens, all their charts are zeroed out. Markets crash not from viruses, but from fear. Empires fall not from barbarians, but from a loss of faith in their own rightness. We have come a long way, from Glushkov's first cybernetic dreams to the cold horror of quantum determinism, looking inside the black boxes that govern our fate. The result of this investigation is paradoxical. Knowing that we are being manipulated frees us from the manipulation. The moment you see the puppeteer strings, you stop being a puppet. You become a spectator who can stand up and walk out of the hall, or step onto the stage and change the course of the play. This fragile blue sphere, hanging in absolute emptiness, has seen thousands of generations convinced they were living at the end of times. But every time there was someone who refused to accept that script. Today, that someone is you. Don't let the algorithms write your biography. Don't surrender your right to a mistake, to a risk, to irrationality, because it is precisely in chaos, in unpredictability, in the breaking of the rules that the spark of life is hidden, the spark that no supercomputer will ever be able to simulate. If this report shifted your point of assembly, if you felt the cold wind of a reality that isn't talked about on the news, let us know. Subscribe to this channel not for entertainment, but to stay in touch with those who are also looking for a way out of the labyrinth. Leave your forecast in the comments. Will we break the code, or will we become part of it? It will be our own human registry of probabilities. The servers will keep humming, cooled by liquid nitrogen. The satellites will keep scanning the surface of the planet. The elites will keep pouring concrete around their refuges, hiding from the ghosts they themselves have brought into being. Let that be their choice and their fear. We have something more important than any guarantee of safety. We have the unknown. And as long as the future is hidden in the fog, it belongs to us. Remember, the observer affects the experiment by the single fact of his presence. Don't look away. Stare into the abyss until it blinks first. The future is not written. It is being written right now by you. Please write in the comments how this story landed for you. It really matters to me to know whether what we put together here got under your skin. What do you think? Was Glushkov right to insist on his system to the very end? Or was it precisely his stubbornness that became the cause of its failure? And one more thing. Do you find it more comfortable to watch horizontal video footage or vertical on your phone?